Arcane builds in Elden Ring have always had the image of bleed builds, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, we will not be breaking the mold today. In today's Elden Ring challenge run, we're going to find out if Arcane is still overpowered in Shadow of the Erdtree, making builds from 3 stages of the DLC. The early game, or the first available areas, the mid game, after defeating some bosses, and the end game, once we unlock the Shadow Keep. Dropping into the first area, I collected all the available Skadu Tree fragments, getting me up to a level 6 blessing. Now, the first build for this video was actually quite difficult to decide, as the early release uproar on overpowered Arcane builds included weapons that were available upon starting the DLC. Take for example the Blood Fiend's Arm Colossal Weapon, arguably the strongest status weapon in the entire game, because of its high occult scaling, and also because of its heavy attacks that have an extra hit, which totals you up to 180 status motion value, meaning that the 200 bleed buildup that you have will deal up to 360 bleed per hit. But today, I'd like to propose that there is a better build. In PvP Elden Ring, the Cross Naginata is notorious for being a second Rivers of Blood, an annoying, barely dodgeable, high damaging combo, except this time it's just not as easy to nerf. Well, the thing with this build is that you can actually only get one Cross Naginata per playthrough, locking its full potential. But in the DLC, that has changed, because setting spawn at the Ruined Forge lava intake lets you go outside to easily farm these Blood Fiends. And at high Arcane, with some gear, it won't be difficult to get 2 copies of the Blood Fiend's Fork. The rest of the build is pretty straightforward. Give the 2 spears the Seppuku Ash of War under the Occult Infusion. Get the Rotten Wing Sword, the Blood Exaltation, and the Spear Talisman. Ideally, you'd want the White Mask, but apparently you can't get it after killing Mohg. And to make this build even easier, I decided to use the new Solitude armor set, which is basically just a better bullgoat. Here are the stats. This build's greatest strength is what the Blood Fiend's arm lacks. You literally do not have to think. It has 3 buffs, and once you're in the battle, you just spam right-click and maybe dodge when you feel like it. And it's not like you're trading damage for survivability. No, this build was so strong, I accidentally killed my favorite test dummy. I usually keep this guy alive for later, but for this run, I'm left to test the next builds with whatever. I'll give this build the easiest build award for having the ability to kill Rolana within 30 seconds. Now, let's move on to the next area. Dragon incantations have always been an interesting topic in the Elden Ring sphere, as every new dragon challenge run gets a million views somehow. So, as the token incantation for the Arcane stat, of course I have to cover these incantations somewhat. So, I'll go on brand and showcase the current new most buffable dragon incantation, because you can see that the most powerful dragon incantations usually don't have that many specialized buffs to go with them, which is fair considering they're already overpowered as it is, though this means that their damage ceiling isn't much higher than it is at base value. The DLC changed this by adding a whole transformation that gives a 20% damage bonus to all communion incantations. But I can't actually use that right now, as you need to enter the Shadow Keep to unlock it. But instead, what we do have is the new Talisman of the Dread, which very nicely applies to the Magma Breath incantations. With this new addition, we now have 15% from the Roar Talisman, 15% from the Dread, 12% from the Scorpion, and 8% from the Canvas. But the positives don't end there. Most of the dragon incantations have a moderately high motion value, and that's meant to be spread throughout multiple hits. But the Magma Breath has one super high motion value in one hit, which means 2 important things. 1, the damage is front-loaded, which means most of your damage is concentrated in the front. This is important in situations specifically like the DLC with its incredibly quick bosses, because even if the continuous damage output does a higher total damage number, you are much less likely to actually land that whole attack. Meanwhile, the front-loaded option just dumps that damage first, and then you can just run away from whatever's coming at you. Number 2, Oil Pot. You see, the oil debuff only applies to the next singular instance of fire damage. So once again, if your damage is spread throughout a couple hits, you can't really make a full use of the Oil Pot's potential. The Magma Breath single hit fixes that problem entirely. In this new area, we also have access to the hefty Oil Pot, which decreases fire resistance by 65% instead of the old 40%. You can buy all the white flesh mushrooms from a bell bearing that you can get from the Iyak River downstream, and then you can just go up to the Iyak River cave to farm the dew gems. Altogether, this build gives us a total of 5,000 damage, or with a level 10 blessing, 7,000 damage. Here are the stats, talismans, and the buffs. I'd be comfortable saying that this is the strongest incantation build for the Arcane stat. Before moving on to the next build with the Shadow Keep unlocked, I went to get the Domain of Dragon's painting and climbed the Jagged Peak to unlock the Rock Heart, and with the complete build, it does this much damage. Now for the strongest arcane build. See, this build was actually just as hard to figure out as the first, mainly because the competition is quite tall, but also because there aren't really any newly available arcane weapons in the endgame. But this video is posted, so you know I actually did make a decision. You see, Elden Ring's weapon skills range from light taps to calling down the blood of an outer god to demonstrate the pain of having inferior to your male adversaries. So while Flame of the Red Mains represent the lady's shampoo, the dancer and finesse skills are the 13-in-1. These skills include a ton of combos that can be used in varying methods, and some even give you invulnerability frames during their animation, which is where our strongest build comes in. What I think is one of the most underrated weapons in Elden Ring is the Bloody Hellas, because its weapon skill Dynast's Finesse is an absolute powerhouse. Upon pressing the skill button, your character does a little flip, after which you can follow up with a thrust and another thrust swing. So, what makes it insane? Let's start with the fact that the flip animation has 0 startup frames. 0. That means from the very moment you press the skill button, you are invulnerable. And that invulnerability lasts for 20 frames, by the way. After that, you get a super quick thrusting attack that deals 185 motion value. That's even more than a charge attack for a fraction of the speed, which means it can do high damaging counterattacks very efficiently, and pair well with the Spear Talisman. Just to top it off, it also deals 33 stance damage, a decision that just makes my eyes pop out of their sockets when I think about it. Like, dude, why? Oh, and there's also a second decent follow-up if you ever had the chance. The whole combo deals 55 stance damage. But how did the DLC make this better? Well, to answer that question, we need to make some very difficult decisions.
I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
The sacrifices I make to pump out these videos, man. This succulent reminder of how God will never forgive me grants us a 14% damage bonus to all of the dynastic skills, including the finesse. I paired this with these talismans, these very simple buffs, although I also included the greater barriers just to make it easier. And now you have the strongest skill expression build in the entire game. No other playstyle comes close to the amount of flair you can give to your timing and spacing while also giving you a ton of damage. Although it does remind you that one day you will have to answer for your actions, and God may not be so merciful. Strongest overall arcane build. But if you're tired of seeing bleed builds and killer dances, check out these other DLC breaking runs. See you there!